Hi, I'm Dr. Melissa, and this is Empathy in Action. Empathy is a really hot ticket now, and my DMs are filled with people asking me questions every day. So this is my opportunity to connect with my people one-on-one. And for you to ask how you use empathy in daily life, in leadership, and out in the world. Using empathy is now more important than ever. So let's talk. Hello, wisdom and truth and empathy seekers. I am so glad to have you back with me this week. Welcome, welcome. So today we're going to actually move right off of what we talked about last week with being nice and being kind and move into boundaries. Because boundaries are one of the biggest ways that you can show yourself kindness. But did you know that boundaries without self-empathy are just rules that nobody follows, including you? We're going to get into that here today. And I'm even going to give you a 3-step framework on how to set boundaries. So first, give it up for my lady producer in the house, Leslie Flowers, doing all the hard stuff. I just get up here and yak, and she takes care of all the heavy lifting. I'm seeing Chasen in the comments. Hello, Chasen, and big props to HR for you. I'm seeing Dan. I'm seeing Meryl, hey, it's great to have you back. And it looks like Jackie's there. I can't necessarily see everybody, but hi, I am so glad to have you guys here in the audience. So let's dig in. But before, I do have one quick announcement to make because I am going to be speaking at Harvard at the end of this month, and I'm going to be talking about empathy. So keep your eyes open. I will take you on my journey. It's going to be exciting. So hang in there with me, empathy people. It's going to be fantastic. All right, into boundaries. I know that's why you're here. And Meryl, by the way, I saw that you had a question last week, and we are getting to that today. So hang in there with me. And for everybody that's catching this on YouTube or in podcasts, please like, subscribe, and comment. Throw your questions into the DMs, and maybe next week your questions will be one that we're going to answer. All right, what are boundaries? You guys know me well enough by now to know that I am not going to go into this without giving you a definition and a scholar's eye view of what this is. All right. So what are boundaries? According to Stanford, they are the limits that you set on what is safe, acceptable, and healthy in your relationships, work, and personal well-being. Now, what I like about this definition is it says it's the limits you set. Boundaries are about what you do. You cannot control anybody else, but you can control what happens in your world. So this is important. They're how we build health, safety, and respect in our relationships, all relationships. All right? This is important. Now, one thing that I was digging into, Melanie, it's great to see you, that I was digging into last week that I thought was interesting is much like empathy, this breaks down into much smaller categories. And I think we miss that because we think of boundaries as we got to set boundaries. Whew, all this massive boundaries everywhere, right? And so you have people that are like, you need to set boundaries. Well, okay, how do I do that? Well, I don't know, just go set some. Well, what are they? Well, I don't know, but just use them. People do that with empathy too. And unfortunately, it doesn't leave us with much of an idea of how we do this. So here are the 5 buckets, the big buckets of boundaries. And as we go through these, take a moment and think about where you've maybe had boundaries pushed in these areas. All right. First one, emotional. All right. When you're setting boundaries around emotional, you're protecting your feelings and your emotional energy. All right. It's what you give to others emotionally and what you won't tolerate. So remember, boundaries are not just about what you won't have. They're also about what you will have. Now, violations, just to give you an idea, include things like being guilt tripped. Now, my mom practically made a profession out of guilt tripping. And so this is something I still deal with today because that's my signal that I need to just roll over and do whatever. So some of these, remember, we learn these in childhood. They get ingrained very young. So violations of emotional boundaries might be guilt trip, might be a dismissal of your feelings. Oh, you're being too sensitive. Demanding more from you emotionally than you're willing to give. All right. Physical. I think this one pretty much speaks for itself, but it's personal space and body. Physical privacy, how close people can get to you, where people are uninvited in your space. And again, it's good to know not only what you won't tolerate, but what you will. Sexual boundaries. Again, I don't think we need to define it too far other than to say it's what you are and aren't comfortable with in terms of behavior and contact. Now, the next one is one I don't think we think about enough, and that's intellectual boundaries. This is what protects basically your right to your own mind, your own opinions, your own thoughts, your own ideas. Without intellectual boundaries, we end up with groupthink, where you have everybody thinking the same things and just going along in lockstep, like the movie 1984. We need to be able to protect our intellectual boundaries because it's important to authentically be who you are, to know what you think and understand. Someone who violates this, now think about this. Think about when you've seen this happen today. Maybe not to you, maybe to somebody else. But violations of this are when people will mock your perspective, will shut down your questions, talk over the top of you, or insist their way of thinking is the only way of thinking. Tell me this isn't happening in our world. The last one is financial. Boundaries around protecting your money, financial decisions, and relationship resources. So violations of these boundaries might be someone who repeatedly takes advantage of your generosity or pressures you into financial decisions you don't want to make. Oh, come on, let's go out for lunch at the expensive restaurant. You can afford it. Oh, come on, sis, can't you just borrow me $25 more this week? I'm good for it. We've all had these boundaries breached at one time or another. But stop and think about the buckets that they actually fall into: emotional, physical, sexual, intellectual, and financial, and note how this is happening in the world. Now, the interesting thing is that when someone does go past your boundaries, usually they go past more than one. And this is how you can really know this is happening. For example, I had a friend who I thought he was a friend, and he all of a sudden decided that he was going to start this business group and he wanted me to be in it. And he just started badgering and pushing, and you got to do this and you got to be in it and you got to have it. And eventually this friendship just kind of dissolved and he unfriended or unconnected or unpersoned or whatever you do. And that was that. But he managed to hit 4 of the 5 boundaries in the process. He breached my intellectual boundaries because I didn't want to have what he was teaching. I already knew what I thought, and it was mine. I didn't want to think like he thought because I saw how he ran his business. Physical, not because he was in my space with his body, but he was calling me and calling me and calling me and texting me and calling me and texting me. And it's finally, I had to just shut my phone down because I couldn't take it anymore. It was in my physical space and I couldn't get out of it. Financial, because he automatically expected that I was going to pay for this. He didn't ask me if I would. He demanded that I would. And the 4th was emotional. He tried to guilt trip me. He tried to tell me why I needed it. And then when I wouldn't do it, he yelled at me and went off about it. And I lost the friendship. But let me ask you, did I really lose anything? Because if this person was that willing to push back all of my boundaries on purpose to get what he wanted, then maybe he wasn't much of a friend. And keeping my boundaries in place let me know what I needed to do. Something to think about. So what are the 2 things you've got to do before you can set boundaries? Don't worry, we're going to get into the 3 steps of the how, but there's 2 things you got to have in place first. You've got to have self-awareness and you have to have self-reflection. Now, I haven't taken the time to get into self-empathy too much on this show yet. I will. In fact, I think that's going to be next week. But self-empathy has 4 steps, 2 of which are self-reflection and self-awareness. They're both ways to be kinder to yourself. A lot of times we aren't kind to ourselves because we're being nice to everybody else. Remember, nice is a social lubricant. It's what we do to make other people comfortable. It's what we do to make social interactions easy. That's nice. But in being nice, sometimes we're not being kind to ourselves. Oh, come on, just go ahead and lend her that money. It'll keep her quiet and then she won't be a problem anymore. Yeah, but that's not nice to me because now I'm losing that $20 that I kind of need to buy cat food this week. It's that nice versus kind paradigm. So let's actually give a primer on self-empathy because this is important. Because there are 4 steps to developing self-empathy, and you cannot have self-empathy for anybody else until you have it for yourself first. All right? The first is self-observation. And that means I need you to take a step back and just watch what you're doing. Yeah, I did give into that. I was being a doormat there. If I'm a leader, I did let my employees walk over me. I did give into the needs of that one employee while ignoring everybody else. Yeah, but do not put any kind of emotion on it. There's no judgment, right? Empathy and judgment cannot exist in the same space. Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Critical, not caring. All right. It's like a computer. If you give your computer data, it's not going to say, oh, I don't like that. It's just going to look at the data and look for patterns and look for data and see how it all comes together. That's what you do in step 1. You just observe. It takes some time to be able to do that without laying emotions on top of it, but that's what you do. All right. Second step, self-reflection. You turn the lens inward. You say, why am I doing these things? Why am I, reacting in this way? Why do I feel these boundaries are here? Because you have to think about these boundaries before you need them. If you think about them after you need them, it's probably already too late. So like for me, I can be really weird around my financial boundaries because I grew up in a home that was poor. My dad was enlisted military. My mom was a housewife. So I very much have strong financial boundaries, and that's why, because I don't ever want to be in those situations again. So reflect on it. Why do I react this way? What is it that I'm trying to do? All right. Self-awareness, you turn the lens outward. How is this working with the world? How am I interacting with the world? Am I putting up these boundaries as a way of keeping people away? Am I using these boundaries in a way that's unhealthy? Because you can do that. There are people who will use boundaries as a weapon. But if you actually use some self-empathy and see how this interrelates to the world, you won't do that. And then the 4th is self-compassion. And we haven't talked much about compassion yet either. We're going to, because compassion is the action to empathy. So the compassion is going to be to have your boundaries where they are going to be healthy, where they are going to serve you best. All right. So as you're getting into setting these boundaries, keeping in mind that the self-reflection and the self-awareness are going to pop up over and over and over again. All right. So what are some reasons that people tend to not have boundaries? You have to know what your boundaries are, self-reflection, to know why you may be letting people push them. Big one, avoiding conflict. Being nice. Did anybody else after last week go, I don't ever want to be nice ever again? I'm going to be kind all day long, but I don't really care about nice. Nice is fine. It has its place, but it doesn't substitute for kindness. People pleasing, being everybody's friend. I see this in leadership a lot because it actually ties into imposter syndrome. These leaders want to be everybody's friend so that they don't get found out. It goes hand in hand with low self-worth, low self-esteem, these kinds of things, which is why you have to do the self-reflection to understand what's happening. Not knowing where your boundaries are set. Have you not thought about it yet? Take the time. It's going to be well worth it. All right? Is it a habit? Have you conditioned yourself to just go along to get along? Because we can create habits, right? Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And if you've practiced yourself to be in that situation where you're just going to go with whatever, You're not only training yourself, but you're training the people around you to go with it. And there will always be people that will want to push past your boundaries. So, just like last week when we were talking about the dark triad, you have to police your own sanity because no one else is going to do it for you. Now, be aware boundaries are not about controlling anybody else. You cannot control anybody else. You have to control you. The only thing you control is the way you react and what you do. So, here's how you set boundaries 3 steps. Number 1, focus on what you can control. I can't control how Bob is going to act. There is nothing I can do about Bob, but I can react to what I do. If Bob starts yelling at me, I can tell him what the consequence is going to be. And that's the second part of this statement. When you decide what you're going to focus on, it can't just be a statement. It has to be an if-then statement. If you do this, then that will be the consequence. It can't just be, don't yell at me. It can be, if you yell at me, then I'm going to hang up. And that's how you know you're actually setting a consequence, is you put down an if-then statement. The second is to be clear and concise, because just like you can't read other people's minds, they can't read yours. So make sure you're conveying exactly where your boundaries are. All right. This is kindness. Clarity is kindness. You are being kind to me by telling me exactly where you stand, because now I can honor that. You're giving me the opportunity to give you what you want. The third, set consequences and stick to them. It's so easy to set consequences. It's a lot harder to stick to them. All right. Remember, boundaries without consequences are just suggestions. And they might be very nice suggestions, but they're not going to be the suggestions that are going to get you what you need. All right. And there are people who are like little kids. If they think your boundary's here, they're going to try to move this and do this and do this. So just don't give them any play, because like little kids, if you give them an inch, they're going to keep inching. We in this audience, we are amazing, empathetic people, but we also understand that not everybody has put thought and effort into it. So protect yourself, protect your sanity, protect your own boundaries. Don't worry about being nice to others if it means not being kind to yourself. There will always be people who will mistake your kindness for weakness. By keeping your boundaries in place, you're being kind to yourself without being weak. All right, I saw a question come up in the chat, I think from Mr. Chase in forehand. What are your thoughts on the difference between creating boundaries and disconnecting because you have difficulties with courageous conversations? That's a great question, because that's where it goes from being healthy to being unhealthy. Remember with the initial definition that setting boundaries are a way to healthily back up your relationships, whether it's at work or at home or whatever. If you're disconnecting, that's not healthy, because not only are you not showing yourself kindness, because maybe these are conversations that you really need to have, but you're not showing the other person kindness because you're taking away from them the opportunity to know you and your needs and maybe what you want. I mean, how many times have you, been talking to somebody and you're like, well, if you'd have just told me what you wanted, I'd have been happy to do it. I mean, it happens a lot, more than we realize. There's some stinkers. There's some goobers out there. I think we all know who the goobers are, right? But for the most part, I really believe we as people want to honor one another. We want to do well by one another. And by communicating instead of disconnecting, we have the opportunity to bring people in and say, hey, here's my boundary, but I still want you to come right up to that boundary and, let's communicate and let's talk and let's be humans together. That's a fantastic question, because people use boundaries as barriers all the time. And that's when it becomes unhealthy. It's always a question of, where does it become unhealthy? Yeah, absolutely. Undelivered communications. That's absolutely right. Because we get caught up in our heads and we're like, yeah, this is what's going on. I know it's what's going on. And I'm sure they know what's going on, even though they may not know what's going on. And you don't know what they don't know what's going on. And Next thing you know, you got a circus. And we all do it. That's the thing. So I have a couple questions from last week. And if you guys have questions about what we're talking about now, throw them in there. Or if you don't want to do it there, put them in the DMs, put them in the chat, put them in wherever. And I will be happy to answer that. So let's circle back on some questions from last week here real quick. The first one came from our very own Leslie Flowers. And it was a fantastic question because we were talking about nice versus kind, right? And how nice is social lubricant. It's how we get by, it's how we're comfortable, it's how other people are comfortable, but it doesn't necessarily give the best outcomes. In fact, sometimes it gives the opposite, you know, because we're so busy being nice, we're not actually focused on what's best for ourselves and the other person. So her question was, I was thinking how perfectly kind works with empathy. Yes. Does nice have any place with empathy? No, I don't think it does. Empathy isn't always nice because I have to have the hard conversations, just like Jason was talking about. You know, if I want someone truly to grow and do better and be better, sometimes that means having the hard conversation, always with kindness, but saying things that may or may not be received well and are making everybody uncomfortable. That's the big thing with nice. It's always seen from your point of view and it's about comfort. Kind is seen from the other person's point of view and it's about optimal outcomes. So, yeah, no, empathy isn't always very nice, but it is always kind. Always. It has to be because you're taking the other person's point of view in first. All right. Meryl Cass had a fantastic question last week. Does gaslighting fall under the performative category of control and manipulation? What a fantastic question, Meryl. So, we were talking about performative empathy, which is where you're performing the act of empathy. It looks like empathy, right? It looks like you're taking on the perspective of the other person, but you're not. You're using it for manipulation. Not you. I don't mean you necessarily, but the people that do this, they're using that supposed empathy to manipulate the other person. That's what gaslighting is. Now, let's be really clear about this because gaslighting, we throw terms around in our society a lot, like narcissism, gaslighting, and psychopath, that aren't really what they are. People will throw gaslighting out there and they just mean it to mean lying. People were lying. Yes, teenagers, give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Boy, that's the truth. That's the truth. Teenagers and cats. So yes, it's not gaslighting is more than just lying. Gaslighting is when you lie to somebody so much that they start to doubt their own sanity. And this is important. All right. So there was a movie, I want to say it was in the 20s or the 30s. This is where this term comes from because it was called gaslighting. And what it was is the guy in the movie would turn down the gas lights in his house a little bit more every night and a little bit more. But the whole point was to make his wife believe that she was going crazy. And by the end of this film, she started to completely disconnect from reality. And that's what gaslighting is. It's manipulating somebody else's reality until they start to doubt their own sanity. So yes, performative empathy. You know, well, I was only doing it to help you. Well, I was only thinking of you. That would be performative empathy within gaslighting. So yeah, absolutely. And that's a really, really good point, actually. Meg Klassen in Boise asked, how do I use empathy with someone who's hurt me? That's a great question. Because all of us have been in that situation where we're trying to decide if we disconnect or if we go back to talk to this person. All right. So my first question would be, unfortunately, I didn't get more than just that question because there would be other things I would want to know. But the first thing I would say to keep in mind is that empathy doesn't just have to be about feelings, right? So if you're emotionally involved with someone, that doesn't mean you have to immediately let them back in and let them wreak havoc on your life. I would say start with cognitive empathy, which if you remember, is that I logically understand where you're coming from. I just don't necessarily feel it. And I think this is important, especially in relationships where we can get really tangled, right? So take a step back and cognitively try to understand their perspective. Me personally, if I have someone that I think might be a problem, that I think could be destructive, I want to take their perspective because I want to see it coming. I want to know what this person's about. All right. Think of it like being a detective. You're looking for clues, but you're not really getting emotionally engaged. For instance, narcissists, as part of what creates narcissists, usually it's a really hard time in childhood, probably one where they're neglected, one where they're marginalized, one where they're treated badly, any of the above. It can be a really hard way for these people to grow up. And that would be something that you would want to have empathy for that person, right? I mean, nobody wants to come up that way. But their response to this hard childhood is usually to build a kind of a shell and to keep everybody else out through their narcissistic actions. Narcissists, contrary to popular belief, they actually don't usually love themselves. It's usually the opposite. It's kind of like imposter syndrome on steroids. They're trying to keep everybody back by telling you how great they are while the whole time in their head going, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough. So those kind of people would probably want your empathy, right? I want to understand who they are so I know who they are, but I'm not going to give them emotional empathy because you're just going to get it blown up time after time after time. This is a pattern of behavior. So if someone does hurt you, yeah, I want to know their perspective because I want to know why they did what they did. Now let's flip to the other side. Let's say there was no bad intent. Let's say that they didn't mean for it to happen. Let's say that, it just was something that happened. Then this is your opportunity to use your boundaries. This would be the perfect place to start setting these because one, you can focus on what you control. You can't control what they're going to do, but you can control how they treat you, right? Your if-then statement. If you're going to treat me badly, then I'm going to need to leave. Be clear and concise, communicate so they know, and set your consequences and stick to them. You're not just setting boundaries, you're training others. You're breaking habits and you're training others how you want to be treated. And that's especially important in close relationships where these boundary lines can get blurred. And they can. So one thing I want to bring out, I saw go by in the comments, Leslie Flowers is so good. She found the movie. It's called Gaslight from 1944 with Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman and Joseph Cotton. So, this Friday, if you want to do your Gaslight studies and figure out where this came from, watch that movie because you'll never think of it as just lying again. It's definitely a twisted mind thing. So I am so excited with the Harvard thing, but I also want to tell you guys that this weekend I am going to California where I'm going to go play French horn and teach at an adult music festival and lay on the beach. So next week when I come back, I plan on being bronzed and musical. I will be very excited to see you all. I'll tell you all about my California adventures up by San Francisco, and I'm always looking forward to our conversation. So remember, by next time, this week, as you're going through this stuff, start thinking about where you can set boundaries, how you can put these things into play. And as we always say, because I want you using both emotional and cognitive empathy, remember to always keep a cool head and a warm heart. Bye for now. Want to know more? Connect with me here on LinkedIn. Or follow this QR code to my website, where you can find my newsletter, my blog, my talks, and all things emotional intelligence and empathy.